"Step away from the child, sir." The words cut across Bay 3 like a blade, and every head at the bus station turned toward Marcus Reed. He sat on the metal bench in his faded olive jacket, one hand still near the open bottle of water he had placed beside a trembling little boy. Ethan Carter clutched it with both hands, his small backpack pressed to his chest. Lieutenant Daniel Brooks lifted his radio, polite but hard-eyed. "Unknown male with the missing child." Ethan whispered, "Please don't make me go." 3 hours earlier, the same bench had been almost empty except for the smell of diesel, wet concrete, and old coffee drifting from the vending machines near the glass doors. Bay 3 sat just outside the civilian entrance to Fort Calder, close enough that soldiers in uniform passed by every few minutes, far enough that nobody inside the station seemed to feel responsible for anybody else. Marcus Reed stood under a humming fluorescent light with his 9-year-old daughter Lily beside him, her pink backpack hanging from one shoulder and a folded clinic appointment card tucked carefully in her front pocket. They were waiting for the 8:15 bus that would take them across town to the free dental clinic. The one Marcus had called 3 times to confirm because Lily had been pretending her tooth did not hurt. He wore his old olive coat even though the morning was warm, and the strap of his worn backpack had been repaired with black electrical tape. His military watch, scratched across the glass, ticked against his wrist as he counted the minutes without looking impatient. Lily leaned against his side and asked if missing the bus would mean missing the dentist. Marcus looked down at her, softened his voice and said, "We don't borrow trouble before it arrives, baby." Then the trouble arrived, small, silent, and alone. A boy no older than 6 stood near the yellow curb line with his backpack hanging crooked, his cheeks wet, and his shoes pointing in 2 different directions like he had stopped walking before his body knew what to do next. A bus engine coughed awake behind him. The driver tapped the horn once. The boy flinched and took a half-step toward the lane. Marcus moved before anyone shouted. Not fast enough to scare him, not close enough to grab him. He simply stepped into the boy's line of sight, lowered one hand, and said, "Hey little man, look at my shoes." The boy froze. The bus hissed. Marcus kept his voice low. "Good. Now take 1 step back from that yellow line." The boy obeyed, barely. Around them, people saw him, then looked away with that quick, practiced motion adults use when they decide a problem belongs to someone else. A woman in a navy blazer pulled her purse tighter. A college kid lifted his phone not to call for help, but to record. Marcus glanced once toward the security camera above Bay 3, then toward the open bench behind him. He did not ask the boy where his mother was. He did not touch his shoulder. He did not crowd him with questions. He just moved his backpack aside and nodded to the empty space. "Sit where people can see you. That keeps you safe." The boy stared at him with eyes too scared to trust and too tired to run. Lily quietly slid closer to her father to make more room. Marcus took the plastic water bottle from the side pocket of his backpack, cracked the seal, twisted the cap loose, and set it on the bench between them instead of pushing it into the boy's hands. "You can drink it if you want," he said. "You don't have to." The boy waited 3 seconds, then picked it up with both hands like it was heavier than it was. His fingers shook around the clear plastic. Marcus turned his body slightly away so the child would not feel trapped. Above them, the camera's small red light blinked. On the other side of the glass, near the military gate, a guard lifted his radio and looked toward Bay 3. Marcus noticed, but he kept his eyes on the child's breathing. "What's your name?" Lily asked gently. The boy swallowed, hugging the bottle against his chest. "Ethan," he whispered. "Okay, Ethan," Marcus said.
"I'm Marcus."
"That's Lily. We're going to stay right here where the camera can see us." Ethan looked past him toward the soldiers at the gate, and fear tightened his mouth again. "I lost Mom," he said. Marcus nodded once. "Steady. Then we help Mom find you. We don't run. We don't hide. We make you easy to find." A gust of wind pushed an old bus ticket across the wet pavement and pinned it against Marcus's boot. He bent, picked it up, and set it on the bench so it would not blow into the lane. Such a small thing, almost nothing. But as he straightened, he saw Ethan's backpack shift, and a tiny metal eagle keychain flashed under the strap before disappearing again. The tiny metal eagle vanished beneath Ethan's backpack strap just as the first guard reached Bay 3, and Marcus noticed the boy's fingers tighten around the open water bottle. The plastic crackled softly in his hands, louder than it should have been under the fluorescent hum. "Sir," the guard said, professional smile fixed in place, "I need you to stand up and step away from the child." Marcus rose slowly, not because he was guilty, but because sudden movements frighten scared children and nervous men. "I'm standing," he said. "He's sitting where the camera can see him. Step away." "I am." Hands visible. Marcus opened both hands at his sides. The water bottle stayed with Ethan, pressed against his chest like a small clear shield. A few people near the vending machines turned fully now, their coffee cups held halfway to their mouths. The college kid's phone lifted higher. A woman in a navy blazer whispered, not softly enough, "That's why you don't let men like that sit near children." Lily heard it. Her chin dipped, but she did not cry. She just reached for the strap of her pink backpack and squeezed until her knuckles paled. Marcus looked at her once, long enough to steady her, then looked back at Ethan. "Eyes on the bench, little man," he said gently. "Not the crowd." "Sir, don't coach him," the guard said. "I'm helping him breathe. We'll handle the child. Then handle him gently." The guard's jaw tightened, though his voice stayed smooth. Beyond the glass, more uniforms moved near the entrance. Boots clicked on damp concrete. A radio chirped. The smell of diesel mixed with the burnt smell of vending machine coffee and the sharp lemon cleaner someone had used on the station floor before sunrise. Lieutenant Daniel Brooks arrived with his cap tucked under one arm and a polished calm that made everything he said sound official before it sounded true. He was young enough to still wear authority like something recently tailored, and careful enough not to shout in front of civilians. "Good morning," he said, though nobody felt morning in his tone.
"I'm Lieutenant Brooks.
"We have a missing child report in the immediate area. I need identification and a clear explanation of your relationship to this boy." "No relationship," Marcus said. He almost stepped toward the bus lane. "I asked him to sit where people could see him." Daniel's eyes moved from Marcus's faded olive jacket to the worn backpack on the bench, then to the black electrical tape wrapped around one strap. He did not sneer. That would have been easier to name. Instead, his expression became careful, sympathetic, almost kind, the kind of look that made judgment sound like concern. "And you thought the best decision was to keep him beside you?" Marcus inhaled once. Lily watched his hand, the one with the scratched military watch, curl and uncurl by his thigh. "I thought the best decision was not to grab a frightened child," Marcus said. "Sir, please answer only what I ask." "I did. Do you have identification?" Marcus reached slowly into his inside pocket. The first guard shifted closer. Ethan made a small sound, almost nothing, but Marcus heard it. He stopped with 2 fingers still at the edge of his wallet. "I'm taking out my ID," he said, not to Daniel, but to the boy. "Slow." Daniel glanced at Ethan, then back at Marcus, as if even kindness could be part of a plan. Marcus removed his driver's license and an old veteran identification card. The plastic cracked across one corner. The photo faded and rubbed pale from years of being carried behind grocery receipts, clinic cards, and bus passes. Daniel accepted both with gloved fingers. He studied the cracked veteran card a second longer than the license. "Marcus Reed," he read. "Yes." "Former military?" "Yes." "Current employment?" "Maintenance contracts. Driving work when I can get it." The navy blazer woman made a sound under her breath, half pity, half confirmation. Someone behind her murmured, "Of course." Lily's face flushed. Marcus did not look back. He watched Daniel's thumb cover the faded photo on the veteran card, then slide down to the damaged corner. "This card is in poor condition," Daniel said. "It's still mine. Why are you at this station today?" "Taking my daughter to a dental appointment." "On base. Across town." "Then why sit near the military entrance?" Marcus pointed with his eyes, not his hand, toward the sign above them. "Bay 3, Route 18. Because this is where the bus stops." Daniel's face did not change, but the silence around him did. Tightened. Not because Marcus had spoken rudely. He had not. It tightened because the answer was too simple, and simple answers embarrass people who have already built a complicated suspicion. Daniel handed the driver's license to one guard, but kept the veteran card. His radio crackled. A voice came through, clipped and urgent. Command is asking for status on Colonel Carter's child. Ethan flinched so hard that water spilled onto his sleeve. The wet patch spread dark through the fabric. Marcus took one half-step toward him, then stopped himself before anyone could mistake it. "He's okay," Marcus said softly. "Let him hold the bottle." Daniel lifted his radio. Possible abduction concern at Bay 3. Unknown male identified as Marcus Reed, former service member. Reason for contact still under review. The words dropped into the air one by one, clean and official, and every phone that had been low came up higher. Lily whispered, "Daddy." Marcus did not answer right away. He looked at his daughter, then at Ethan, then at the small red light of the camera above Bay 3 blinking steadily over all of them. "Stay where I can see you, baby," he told Lily. "Both of you." "Sir," Daniel said. "Do not give instructions to the child." Marcus looked at him then, calm but wounded in a place he would never point to. "That wasn't control, Lieutenant. That was comfort." Daniel's polite mask held, but his eyes flicked toward the bottle in Ethan's hands, the cracked veteran card in his own, and the camera above them as if, for the first time, he realized all three were recording different versions of the same morning. Then his radio clicked again, and a woman's voice, low and controlled, came through the speaker. "Repeat the last phrase. Why was abduction concern used before the child was interviewed?" The woman's voice on the radio did not rise, but it changed the air around Bay 3. Daniel Brooks held the radio near his mouth, and for half a second his polished confidence paused like a hand catching on a splinter. The guard beside him looked toward the military gate. The people with phones leaned in, waiting for a correction, an apology, anything dramatic enough to feed the little screens in their hands. Marcus did not look at them. He looked at Ethan's sleeve, where the spilled water had soaked a dark patch into the small gray cotton, and then at the boy's fingers, still clenched too tightly around the bottle. "Lieutenant?" The woman's voice repeated through the radio. Daniel straightened. "Command." The term was precautionary. "Was the child interviewed?" "Not yet, ma'am." "Was the adult interviewed?" Daniel's mouth tightened. "In progress." The pause that followed was short, but it felt long enough for the fluorescent light above the bench to buzz twice. Marcus saw Ethan shrinking under every adult sentence. The boy's shoulders had climbed toward his ears. His breathing had gone shallow again. The open bottle trembled so much that another thin line of water slipped over the rim and ran down his knuckles. Lily noticed too. She reached into her pink backpack and pulled out the only snack she had brought, a small peanut butter cracker pack from the kitchen drawer at home. The wrapper was bent at one corner from being carried all morning. She looked at Marcus first, asking without words because that was how children learned caution in a life where there was never enough to waste. Marcus's eyes softened. He crouched slowly, not near Ethan, but near Lily. "Hold it out flat, baby," he said. "Don't open it yet." Lily obeyed, placing the packet on her palm like an offering. Ethan looked at it, hunger flashing across his face before fear covered it again. Daniel watched the exchange with suspicion dressed as procedure. "Sir, do not provide the child with food." Marcus did not look up sharply. He did not argue. He did not say that he had fed soldiers under worse rules and worse weather. He only kept his voice low enough for the children to hear first. "That's why it's still sealed." Then he turned his eyes to Ethan. "You allergic to peanuts, little man?" Ethan blinked. The question seemed to reach him differently than the commands had. It did not pull him. It gave him something small and ordinary to answer. His lips moved before sound came out. "I don't know." Marcus nodded, as if that answer mattered just as much as yes or no. "Then we wait." Lily's face changed. For a second she looked disappointed, not because she wanted the crackers for herself, but because she had wanted to help. Marcus touched the back of her hand with 2 fingers. "Kindness still needs permission," he said. The words were quiet. They were not meant for the crowd. But the body camera on the nearest guard caught them clearly, along with the sealed cracker pack lying unopened on Lily's palm, along with Ethan sitting where the camera could see him, along with Marcus keeping his body angled away so no one could say he had trapped the boy. On the other side of the glass, inside the idling black command vehicle, Colonel Sarah Carter heard the line through the guard's open channel. She had one hand on the door handle and one hand pressed against the folder on her lap, but she did not step out yet. Her son was somewhere in front of her. Every instinct in her body screamed to move, but the job that had cost her so many easy human reactions held her still. Observe first. Confirm. Do not turn fear into another danger. Through the windshield, she saw the man in the faded olive jacket crouched between 2 children and watched how he gave both of them a choice. Not control. Choice. That was the first thing that did not fit Daniel's report. Marcus stood again. His knee clicked softly, a tired sound he ignored. He could feel the old ache in his leg from years of work he never explained to employers who only wanted to know if he could lift, haul, drive, patch, tighten, sweep, and show up on time. In his coat pocket, his phone buzzed once. He knew without checking it that it was the dental clinic reminder. If they missed the bus, Lily might lose the appointment he had waited 6 weeks to get. If they missed the appointment, she would smile through another week of pain because she hated costing him money. He did not reach for the phone. He did not tell Daniel any of that. Pain did not become proof just because you laid it in front of strangers. Instead, he looked at the wet bench where Ethan's spill had spread toward Lily's sleeve. Marcus took the folded napkin he had saved from a gas station breakfast biscuit and wiped the metal bench first. Not the boy, not the bottle, not anything that belonged to someone else. Then he handed the napkin to Ethan by setting it beside the water. "For your hand," he said. "You can do it." Ethan stared at the napkin, then slowly picked it up. His wiping was clumsy. He missed half the water. But his breathing steadied because, for the first time since the uniforms arrived, an adult had given him a task he could finish. The navy blazer woman lowered her phone a little. Not all the way, just enough to show that certainty had begun to embarrass her. Daniel noticed the small shift in the crowd and mistook it for Marcus gaining control of the scene. "Mr. Reed," he said, still polite, "I need you to stop directing the child." Marcus looked at him. "I'm not directing him. I'm giving him back his hands." The words landed softly, but they landed. Even the guard beside Daniel glanced down at Ethan, who was now wiping his own sleeve with serious concentration, lips pressed together the way children press them when they are trying not to cry. Lily watched him, still holding the unopened crackers. She whispered to her father, "He's scared like I was at the hospital." Marcus's face flickered at that. A small break no one in the crowd would have known how to read. The hospital had been his wife's last place and Lily's first lesson that adults could speak in gentle voices, while life fell apart anyway. He swallowed it back before it became visible. "Then we don't make it worse," he said. Ethan looked up. "Mom says that too." The sentence was small, almost lost under the radio static and the bus engine rumbling. Behind them, but Colonel Sarah Carter heard it. Her hand froze on the door handle. Daniel heard only a child repeating a comfort line. Sarah heard something else. The echo of a phrase she had used in family readiness briefings after her husband died, the same principle she had taught every young officer who thought command meant louder orders. She looked through the windshield again, this time not at the scene as a missing child incident, but at the open bottle, the sealed crackers, the napkin placed where Ethan could choose it, and the stranger who had done everything carefully before knowing whose son he was helping. The sealed crackers, the napkin, and the open bottle should have made the scene look less dangerous. But Daniel Brooks saw the opposite. To him, Marcus Reed had done something worse than argue. He had made the child calm without permission. That gave Daniel a story he could control. "Mr. Reed," he said, voice still smooth, "you need to understand how this appears." Marcus looked at Ethan, not at the phones. "I understand how scared he is. That is not what I asked you." "No," Marcus said quietly. "It never is." The sentence was too soft to be disrespect, but it still made Daniel's jaw tighten. Colonel Sarah Carter remained just outside the glass doors, half-shadowed by the frame of the command vehicle. Her son was only yards away. She could see the wet shine on his sleeve, the bottle pressed in his lap, the unopened cracker pack still balanced on Lily Reed's small palm. Every part of her wanted to step in, gather Ethan up, and end the morning by force of rank. But rank could end a scene without finding the truth. Sarah had made that mistake once years ago with a young soldier who had looked guilty because fear had made him quiet. She would not make it again with her own child watching. "Lieutenant," she said into the radio, low enough that only command channel heard it. "Do not move the child until I say." Daniel's radio clicked against his vest. He heard the order and turned his body slightly, almost nothing, just enough to place himself between Marcus and the camera above Bay 3. Marcus noticed it the way he noticed loose bolts on a bus step, or oil under an engine before anyone smelled smoke. He did not point. He did not accuse. He only shifted his eyes toward the red camera light, then back to Daniel's boots now planted in the camera's line. "Lieutenant," Marcus said, "if you want a clear record, you might want to stand a little left." Daniel blinked. "Excuse me?" "Cameras behind you." A tiny silence opened. Not big enough to shame anyone, just big enough for the nearest guard to glance up. Daniel gave a polite breath that was almost a laugh. "Mr. Reed, I'm aware of the camera. Then you know it can't see his hands." Marcus nodded toward Ethan, whose fingers had begun twisting at the backpack strap again. The small metal eagle keychain slipped free and fell onto the damp concrete with a light, bright clink. Ethan startled, reaching for it, but stopped and looked at Marcus first, as if asking whether he was allowed to move. Marcus did not bend down. He did not pick it up. He did not take the boy's property and turn it into evidence in his own favor. He pointed with 2 fingers at the ground, palm open. "Is that yours?" Ethan nodded quickly. "My eagle. You can pick it up if you want." The boy slid off the bench just far enough to grab it, then sat back down with the keychain cupped against the water bottle. Daniel's eyes sharpened. "Let me see that." Ethan pulled it closer. "It's mine." "No one is taking it," Daniel said, though his hand had already lifted. Marcus stepped half a foot sideways, not between Daniel and Ethan, but into the space where a child would feel the pressure before the touch. "Ask his mom when she gets here," Marcus said. "Sir," Daniel replied, "you do not get to set conditions in a security matter." "I'm not setting conditions. I'm keeping him from losing the one thing he says is his." Daniel looked down at the keychain. It was small, brushed metal, shaped like an eagle with its wings open. Mud had dried in the grooves. On the back, just visible when Ethan's fingers shifted, were 4 tiny characters. FRD 17. Daniel saw them and misread the moment before anyone else could read it properly. "How did you know to keep that from me?" he asked Marcus. Marcus's brow moved. "Barely." "I didn't." "You recognized it." "I saw a scared kid drop something. That item may be connected to the base. Then it belongs with the child, not the floor." Behind the glass, Sarah's hand froze on the door handle again. FRD 17. Family Readiness Day, Station 17. A cheap little giveaway from a private event held 3 months earlier inside the base gymnasium, where children had painted flags, eaten cupcakes, and climbed into parked rescue vehicles while their parents pretended not to worry about deployments, grief, and the impossible math of raising children near danger. Ethan had chosen the eagle keychain because it looked like the patch on his father's old rescue jacket. Sarah knew the scuff on the right wing. She had watched him drop it in the driveway 2 weeks ago and cry as if the bird itself had been hurt. A civilian stranger should not know that. Marcus did not know that. And that was exactly what made his restraint matter. Daniel, however, had found a new angle. He turned slightly toward the guard with the body cam. Log that the subject interfered with recovery of possible base identifying property. "I didn't interfere," Marcus said. His voice stayed level. "You reached for it before asking him what it was. The child is 6. That means you ask simpler, not less." One of the passengers let out a low the first sound from the crowd that was not accusation. Daniel heard it and tried to smooth the moment over. "We all want the same thing here," he said, professional again. "We want this child returned safely, and we want to make sure no one took advantage of the situation." Marcus looked at Ethan's wet sleeve, the sealed crackers, the bottle, the eagle keychain locked in the child's fist. "Then start with what happened," he said, "not what it looked like from across the room." The radio on Daniel's vest clicked before he could answer. Sarah's voice came through, calmer than the morning deserved. "Lieutenant, confirm the marking on the keychain." Daniel looked irritated for the first time. "Ma'am, it appears to read FRD-17. A pause. Not long, but sharp. Then Sarah said, "Do not remove it from the child." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the glass doors. "Understood." Ethan looked at Marcus and whispered, "Mom said I keep the eagle if I get scared." It was a child's sentence, simple and broken in the middle. But Sarah heard it through the open channel, and Marcus heard something else inside it. The boy did not say his mother would be angry, or rich, or important. He said she had given him one small thing to hold when fear got too big. Marcus crouched just enough to put his face lower than Daniel's belt and asked, "Does the eagle help?" Ethan nodded. "Then hold it where she can see it when she comes." Daniel exhaled through his nose, as if patience itself had become a burden. "Mr. Reed, stop inserting yourself." Marcus stood back up slowly, hands visible again. "I'm trying to make sure when his mother sees him, she sees him calm." Outside, Sarah finally stepped out of the command vehicle. The morning light caught the silver eagle on her uniform before anyone in the crowd understood who she was. She did not walk fast. She did not call Ethan's name. She looked first at the small eagle in her son's hand, then at the open bottle on his knee, then at Marcus Reed standing empty-handed beside him. And for the first time since the radio call began, the person with the most power at the station seemed less interested in the man being accused than in the careful space he had left around a frightened child. The silver eagle on Colonel Sarah Carter's uniform caught the morning light at the same moment the little eagle keychain trembled in Ethan's fist. And for a strange second, Bay 3 seemed to hold two versions of the same truth without knowing how to connect them. Sarah stopped just outside the glass doors. She could have crossed the distance in 10 steps. She could have said her son's name and ended the public question before it became any uglier. But Ethan's eyes were still on Marcus, not on her. That made her hand lower from the doorframe. Daniel noticed her before the crowd did. His posture sharpened. "Ma'am," he said, turning halfway, careful to keep his voice measured. "We have the child secured." Marcus did not look at Sarah's rank. He looked at the space between the shuttle lane and the yellow line because the reverse alarm from a military transport had just begun to beep behind them. The sound was not loud at first. It came in small, even pulses, backing through the diesel smell and radio static. Ethan flinched at the first beep. At the second, his shoulders rose. At the third, the driver behind the wheel leaned toward his mirror, unable to see the small boy hidden by adults and benches. "Ethan," Marcus said softly, "stay seated." Daniel heard Marcus speak and raised a hand. "Mr. Reed, stop giving instructions." The fourth beep came sharper. Ethan looked from Daniel to the uniforms, then toward the glass doors where his mother stood frozen between command and fear. He did not understand the ranks, the radios, the politics of adults trying not to be wrong. He only understood that too many people wanted him to move and no one sounded like they knew where he should go. The shuttle hissed backward another foot. Its white reverse lights glowed against the wet pavement. A woman in the crowd said, "Somebody get the boy." That was enough to break him. Ethan slid off the bench, still clutching the open bottle and the eagle keychain, and stepped the wrong direction. One sneaker crossed the edge of the yellow line. Daniel shouted, "Stop!" The word cracked over the pavement like a dropped plate. Ethan jerked, but not backward. Forward. Marcus moved then, not fast like panic, fast like discipline. He stepped sideways into the shuttle driver's sight line, lifted one open palm toward the windshield, and used his other hand low at his side, not reaching for Ethan, just giving the boy one clear shape to follow. "Ethan," Marcus said, his voice lower than the alarm, Eyes on my hand. The boy froze. The bottle shook. Water slid down his wrist. One step back. Ethan's lip trembled. Marcus did not blink. One step. That's all. The small shoe came back over the yellow line. The shuttle's brake sighed. Heavy and sudden. For a moment no one spoke. The reverse alarm stopped. The driver's window slid down with a mechanical buzz, and the man behind the wheel leaned out pale-faced. I didn't see him, he said. I didn't see the kid. Marcus lowered his hand only, after Ethan was fully behind the line. Then he stepped back too, making sure the camera above Bay 3, the guard's body cam, and the shuttle's front camera could all see the space between him and the child. He did not touch Ethan. He did not turn to the crowd for approval. He only said, "Good job, little man." Ethan pressed the eagle keychain to his mouth and took a shaky breath. Lily had gone completely still beside the bench, her unopened cracker pack crushed a little in one hand. Marcus looked at her. "You okay?" She nodded too quickly. "He almost—" "But he didn't," Marcus said, gentle but firm. "We stay with what happened." Sarah watched that too. Not just the save. Anyone could have been moved by the save. What caught her was what came after. Marcus did not let the children build a bigger fear out of the almost. He brought them back to the fact that they were still standing, still breathing, still here. Her husband used to do that after hard calls. Reduce the world. Name what remained. Keep the living from drowning in what nearly happened. Sarah reached for her radio. Secure all camera feeds from Bay 3 and the shuttle. No overwriting. No deletion. Mark this as command hold. Daniel turned toward her, his face still professional, but a thin line had appeared between his brows. "Ma'am, with respect, I can handle the scene." "I know you can handle a scene," Sarah said. "I'm asking whether the scene is being understood." That changed the air more than a shout would have. The college kid lowered his phone. The woman in the navy blazer stopped, whispering mid-sentence. Somewhere inside the station, a plastic chair leg scraped the floor and then went silent. Daniel took one slow breath, recalibrating. Mr. Reed's actions may have prevented the child from moving farther into the lane, he said, choosing every word carefully. However, that does not resolve the initial concern. Marcus nodded once. "It shouldn't." Daniel looked surprised. "Excuse me? You still need to find out how he got here. You still need to find his mother. You still need to know who scared him before he sat down." Marcus glanced at Ethan, who was now back near the bench, both hands wrapped around the bottle. "But you don't need to scare him again to do that." The words did not accuse. That made them harder to dismiss. Daniel's jaw worked once. "We follow procedure for a reason." "So do I," Marcus said. "Mine starts with keeping the child steady." Sarah's eyes moved to the yellow line, then the shuttle, then the camera dome above them. She pointed to the nearest guard. "Pull the shuttle footage first. I want the angle before the child stepped off the bench." The guard nodded and moved quickly toward the driver. Daniel's mask held, but his fingers tightened around Marcus's cracked veteran card. "Ma'am, I recommend we move this inside and speak privately before this becomes a public misunderstanding." Sarah looked at the phones, the civilians, Lily's pale face, Ethan's wet sleeve, the open bottle, and Marcus standing empty-handed where everyone could see him. "It is already public," she said. "That is why the record needs to be clean." Marcus bent slightly toward Ethan, but kept his hands behind his back. "You did good," he said. "You heard one voice and took one step." Ethan looked up at him. "I was scared." "Scared can still listen." The boy nodded, and for the first time that morning, his shoulders lowered. Sarah's expression shifted only a fraction, but Daniel saw it and grew more careful. "Colonel," he said quietly, "there may be details here civilians don't understand." Sarah did not take her eyes off Marcus. "Then we will use evidence to understand them." A guard returned from the shuttle holding a small device with the driver's camera feed cued. The screen showed Ethan stepping toward the yellow line, Daniel's shout hitting the moment like a spark, and Marcus moving not toward the child, but toward the driver's mirror first. It showed his open palm. It showed the space he kept. It showed the boy stepping back because of a voice, not because of force. The first proof was small, limited, and undeniable. It did not explain who Marcus was. It did not erase the report. It did not reveal Sarah to Ethan yet. But it changed the station from a place that had been watching a suspect to a place now watching a man who had just prevented harm. While everyone else was still deciding what to call him, Sarah handed the device back to the guard and said, "Run his full service history, not the summary." Daniel's eyes flicked down to the cracked card in his hand, and the tiny red mark on the scan request that appeared a moment later made his voice lower. "Colonel," he said, "there's a flag on his file." The red flag on Marcus Reed's file did not look dramatic on the small field tablet. It was just a thin line of color beside a service note, the kind of mark people learn to trust because a system placed it there. But Daniel Brooks's thumb hovered over it like he had found the answer he needed. "There," he said carefully, turning the screen just enough for Colonel Sarah Carter to see and not enough for the crowd to read. "Departed before formal commendation review. That requires context before we continue treating him as a safe party." Marcus heard the words. Lily heard them too. Her small face turned toward her father, searching for the part of him other people kept trying to make suspicious. Marcus only adjusted the strap of her backpack where it had twisted against her shoulder. "It's okay," he told her. "A question isn't the same as the truth." Sarah's eyes lifted from the tablet to Marcus. She did not soften yet. That mattered. A soft look would have been pity, and Marcus had spent years learning how heavy pity could feel when laid on a working man's back in public. Sarah's gaze was different. It was measuring, controlled, and increasingly precise. "Pull the full file," she told the guard. "Not the summary. I want service notes, incident attachments, and any civilian response logs connected to that flag." Daniel kept his tone even. "Ma'am, we can do that inside. We can begin here. With civilians watching? Civilians are already part of the record." A station printer behind the customer service desk coughed awake, then started spitting out thin sheets with a dry, irritated buzz. The sound filled the gap where the crowd had stopped whispering. Marcus looked toward the bench. Ethan sat with the open bottle between his knees, the eagle keychain tucked in his fist, and his eyes fixed on the ground. The boy had gone quiet again, not peaceful quiet, but the kind of quiet children use when adults are deciding too much above their heads. Marcus made a choice then. He could speak about the red mark. He could tell them why he left before anyone pinned a medal on his chest. He could say that after his wife died, the last thing he wanted was another room full of uniforms clapping while his daughter sat at home asking why her mother's chair was empty. He could turn pain into a defense. But Ethan was still shaking, and Lily was still watching, and revenge would not make either child safer. "Lieutenant," Marcus said. Daniel looked up. "What now? If you're going to talk about my file, lower your voice around the kids." The sentence landed with no force and all its weight. Sarah looked at Ethan, then at Lily. The guard with the tablet lowered it slightly. Daniel's face colored at the edges, but he nodded once, the smallest possible concession. "Fair." The printer stopped. A civilian station supervisor brought the pages over with both hands, suddenly nervous because paper makes things feel official in a way voices do not. Sarah took the stack and laid it on the flat top of a metal trash container near Bay 3 because there was no table, only the public place where the mistake had started. The first page showed Marcus's name, service number, dates, assignments. The second showed a deployment support detail after a coastal storm 7 years earlier. The third had water damage scanned into the corner, a gray bloom across the text, but one line remained clear: assisted evacuation of military families from flooded civilian housing sector. Sarah's eyes did not move for 3 seconds. Daniel leaned closer. "That doesn't explain the departure before review." "No," Sarah said. "It explains why there was a review." Another guard returned from the station office holding a bus schedule printout and a call note from the free dental clinic across town. "Colonel," he said, "Route 18 was delayed. Mr. Reed and his daughter were ticketed for the 8:15. Clinic confirmation call at 7:42 this morning. Pediatric dental appointment. Lily's cheeks flushed with embarrassment at the word dental, as if her toothache had become another thing strangers could inspect. Marcus saw it and shifted half a step in front of her, not hiding her, just giving her a little wall made of his body. "That appointment private?" he asked. The guard looked ashamed. "Yes, sir." Daniel's fingers tightened against the field tablet. His first story had lost one leg. Marcus had not been loitering near the gate. He had been waiting for a bus with his child. But Daniel was trained to keep balance under pressure, and he found a new place to stand. "A legitimate reason to be here does not erase the initial risk," he said.
No, Sarah replied.
"But it changes the assumptions attached to it." Then the technician arrived from the security office with a small black recording box sealed in a clear evidence sleeve. It looked older than everything else in the scene, square-edged, scuffed, labeled with a faded storm response case number. "Ma'am," he said. "Archives had an audio attachment tied to the commendation flag. Quality is poor. We can play a sample." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the phones in the crowd, then toward Sarah. "Colonel, I strongly recommend we review that privately." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Because incomplete audio can be misunderstood. So can incomplete assumptions." No one moved. The technician set the device on the metal surface beside the printed file. The little box looked almost harmless there, surrounded by wet footprints, coffee smell, and the low rumble of buses. Sarah nodded. The technician pressed play. Static came first. Wind. Then a distant alarm. Then voices, broken and submerged under storm noise. A woman crying. A child coughing. Someone shouting coordinates. Then a male voice, low and steady, cut through the damage in the recording. "Make the world smaller. One step at a time." Ethan's head lifted. Lily's hand found Marcus's sleeve. Marcus closed his eyes for less than a second, but Sarah saw it. He remembered that sentence. He remembered that storm. He remembered people clinging to door frames and headlights drowning under brown water. The recording crackled again. The same voice came back, younger but unmistakably built from the same comm Marcus had used. "At Bay 3. Eyes on my hand. One step. That's all." Sarah's face changed in a way almost no one else would have noticed. Not shock. Recognition fighting through discipline. Her husband had told that story once, late at night, when Ethan was too little to understand grief but old enough to ask why some heroes did not have pictures on the wall. He had never remembered the man's name clearly. He had only remembered the voice. A calm man who made fear smaller. Daniel heard the resemblance too, and for the first time his professional mask thinned enough to show sweat at his temple. "Audio quality is distorted," he said. "We cannot confirm identity from that alone." Marcus opened his eyes. He could have ended Daniel with one sentence. He could have said where the recording was made, who was trapped, who carried whom through the floodwater, which rescue truck stalled under the overpass. Instead he looked at Ethan and saw the boy holding the eagle keychain to his mouth the same way he had held the bottle. "He's right," Marcus said. Daniel blinked. Sarah looked at him. "Mr. Reed." Marcus's voice stayed quiet. "A bad recording isn't enough. Get the full chain before you say what it proves." The crowd did not know what to do with that. A man accused in public had just refused the first piece of evidence that might save him because it was not strong enough yet. Sarah looked down at the recording box, then at the shuttle footage still frozen on the guard's tablet, then at the cracked veteran card in Daniel's hand, then at the open bottle beside Ethan's knee. The evidence was no longer a line. It was becoming a pattern. Marcus had been careful with the child, careful with the snack, careful with the keychain, careful even with proof that could help him. Daniel cleared his throat. "Colonel, we should move this inside, finish quietly, and issue any correction later if needed." Sarah finally turned fully toward him. The station seemed to narrow around that look. "Lieutenant." This began in public. Her voice did not rise. A child heard himself treated like evidence. A father heard himself described as a threat. A crowd was allowed to believe a conclusion before we had a timeline. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came. The printer behind the desk clicked once and went silent. Outside, the shuttle's brake lights glowed red against the wet pavement. Sarah placed her palm flat on the printed file so the wind would not lift the pages. "No closed door," she said. "We go back to Bay 3, we build the timeline where it happened, and every claim stands next to the camera, the radio log, and the child's actual movements." Marcus lowered his eyes to Lily, then to Ethan. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He only moved one step closer to the bench, careful not to cross the space Ethan still needed, because the truth had become too heavy now to be handled where no one could see it. Bay 3 did not look like a place where truth belonged. It was only a strip of wet pavement, 3 metal benches, a vending machine humming behind glass, a trash can with the printed service file pinned under Colonel Sarah Carter's palm, and a security camera blinking its small red light above the sign for Route 18. But Sarah brought everyone back there anyway. Daniel Brooks stood near the yellow line with his cap tucked under one arm, his face composed again, his voice ready. The 2 guards stood to the side. The shuttle driver remained by his vehicle, pale and quiet. The passengers who had whispered before now hovered in a loose half-circle, no longer brave enough to speak loudly, not humble enough to leave. Marcus Reed walked back to the bench with Lily beside him, her small hand caught in the hem of his faded olive jacket. He did not look like a man coming to clear his name. He looked like a tired father who still had a bus to catch, a child to feed, and a toothache appointment slipping farther away with every minute. Ethan stood near Sarah now, not in front of her like a shield, not displayed like proof, but slightly behind her left side where he could see Marcus. He still held the open water bottle, the plastic dented where his fingers had squeezed it too hard. The eagle keychain hung from his fist, tapping softly against the bottle with each shaky breath. Sarah looked at Daniel. "Begin with your report." Daniel nodded once. "At approximately 0811, responding personnel observed an adult male seated beside a reported missing child near Bay 3. The adult had no known relationship to the child. Given proximity to the installation and the child's status, I initiated a protective inquiry. The language used over radio was precautionary, not accusatory. It sounded reasonable. That was the dangerous part. A few faces in the crowd shifted, relieved to have a version of events that let them feel less cruel. Daniel continued, smoother now. The situation escalated because Mr. Reed repeatedly engaged the child after being instructed not to. My concern was not his appearance, his economic status, or his background. My concern was child safety. Marcus kept his eyes lowered. Lily looked up at him as if waiting for him to defend himself. He only squeezed her shoulder once. Sarah let Daniel's words hang in the station air until they became part of the record. Then she turned to the first guard. "Camera Bay 3. Start from 0806. The guard held up the tablet. The small screen showed the bench from above, gray morning light, wet pavement, Marcus and Lily waiting with his taped backpack at his feet. It showed Ethan near the yellow curb line before Marcus ever approached him. It showed the bus engine coughing awake and the boy stepping toward the lane. It showed Marcus moving into the boy's line of sight, not reaching, not grabbing, not blocking the camera. Daniel spoke before anyone else could. "That does not remove concern. Many unsafe adults begin by appearing calm." Sarah did not look away from the tablet. "Correct." That single word almost gave Daniel his balance back. He straightened. "Which is why my response was appropriate." Sarah nodded to the guard. "Continue." The footage rolled. Marcus pointed to the bench. Ethan chose to sit. Marcus moved his backpack aside. Lily shifted to make room. Marcus opened the water bottle, placed it between them, and turned his body away instead of closing space around the child. The crowd went quieter. The navy blazer woman's mouth pressed into a thin line. The college kid lowered his phone until the camera faced the floor. Sarah said, "First fact. The child was not pulled to the bench. He chose the bench. Second fact. The water was placed in open view. Third fact. Mr. Reed positioned the child where the overhead camera could see him." Daniel's face stayed neutral, but his hand tightened around the edge of his cap. "Ma'am, those facts can coexist with risk." They can, Sarah said. That is why we keep going. The guard switched to the bodycam footage. The angle shook slightly as Daniel arrived. His voice came through clearer than anyone expected. Step away from the child. Hands visible. Do not coach him. Then Marcus's voice, lower, steadier. I'm taking out my ID. Slow. Lily flinched at hearing it again. Marcus looked down and murmured, "You're okay." The footage showed the cracked veteran card passing into Daniel's hand. It showed Daniel's thumb covering the faded photo. Then came the radio audio, layered over the image like something cold poured into a cup. Possible abduction concern at Bay 3. Unknown male identified as Marcus Reed, former service member. Reason for contact still under review. For the first time, Ethan moved. He stepped closer to Sarah's leg and whispered, "That was the scary word. It was not an accusation. It was a child naming the thing that hurt." Sarah placed one hand gently behind him without pushing him forward. Marcus closed his eyes for one breath. Daniel answered quickly, still careful. The term was used for internal urgency. It was not intended for the child to process. Marcus looked up then. But he heard it.
No anger.
No theater. Just 4 words that made the station feel smaller. Daniel's polite expression thinned. "With respect, Mr. Reed, radio language is not designed for emotional comfort. Then don't use it before you know who can hear." Sarah did not interrupt. She was watching Daniel now, not because she wanted him to fail, but because pressure shows the shape of a person's habits. Daniel turned toward her. "Colonel, I understand the optics. But if I had minimized the language and something had happened, this conversation would be very different." There it was, his best defense, and it was not foolish. Fear of being wrong can look like responsibility. Sarah accepted the weight of it. "That is true." A small ripple moved through the crowd. For 1 second Daniel seemed to win back the room. Then Sarah said, "Now play the shuttle angle." The guard changed feeds. The screen showed the shuttle reversing. Reverse lights white against wet pavement. Ethan's body tightening at the beep. Daniel's shout striking the moment. The boy stepping the wrong way. It showed Marcus moving toward the driver's mirror first. Not toward Ethan. Not to snatch him. His palm rose in the exact line of sight the driver had missed. Then his voice, captured faintly but clearly. "Ethan, 1 step back. Eyes on my hand." The driver's face drained all over again as he watched. "I didn't see him," he said, barely above a whisper. "I swear I didn't see him until Mr. Reed stepped out." Daniel exhaled. "And I already acknowledged Mr. Reed's action may have prevented further movement into the lane." Marcus turned slightly toward him. "Not may have." The quiet correction stopped Daniel more effectively than anger could have. Marcus did not press. He did not smile. He only looked at Sarah. "I'm not asking anyone to pretend your job is easy. I'm asking you not to make a child carry the weight of your fear." The words settled over Bay 3. Even the vending machine seemed louder after them. Sarah nodded once to the technician, who stood beside the trash can with the small black recording box still sealed in its clear sleeve. "Before the archive audio," she said, "we finished today's timeline." Daniel's eyes flicked to the box, then back to Sarah. "Colonel, that archive is not part of today's event. It may be part of the pattern." "Pattern?" His tone stayed professional, but the word came too quickly. Sarah noticed. Marcus noticed. The guard with the bodycam noticed because his eyes shifted from Daniel to Sarah. Sarah picked up the printed sheet from the dental clinic. Mr. Reed's presence at Bay 3 was accounted for. Route 18, 8:15. Pediatric dental appointment for Lily Reed. That removes loitering from the concern. She placed it beside the cracked veteran card. Then she pointed to the first still from the camera. The child moved toward him after another adult startled him. That removes initial approach. She pointed to the water bottle in Ethan's hands. The object he gave the child remained visible from the first frame. That removes concealment. Daniel's throat moved. None of that identifies why Mr. Reed used military-style commands. Sarah looked at Marcus then, and for a moment the entire public confrontation balanced on whether he would finally defend his own history. Marcus could have said the storm, the families, the water, the men he had carried, the medal he walked away from. Instead he looked at Ethan and Lily, then at the phones still hovering at the edges. "Turn the phones away from the children," he said. Daniel blinked. "That is your response?" "That is my response." Sarah's gaze sharpened, not with suspicion now, but recognition. A man trying to win would have used the moment. Marcus used it to protect 2 children from becoming footage. Sarah raised her hand. "All civilian recording stops now. Faces of minors are not to be captured or shared." The guards moved. Phones lowered. The crowd obeyed because rank had finally been used for the right thing. Daniel looked down at the cracked veteran card, then at the archive box. "Ma'am," he said more quietly, "if you open that recording out here, you may create an assumption in the other direction." "That Mr. Reed is honorable?" Sarah asked. "That he is connected to something you have not yet verified fully. That is why we verify it with him standing here." The technician lifted the recording box. Static would come first. Everyone knew that now. But beside it, Sarah's phone buzzed with a secure message from the records office. She read it, and the color left her face in a controlled military way. Attached to the old storm response file was not just audio. There was a photograph. Sarah placed the phone face down for 1 second, as if even she needed time before the final door opened. Then she looked at Marcus Reed, at Ethan's Eagle keychain, at the open bottle that had started the whole morning, and said, "Put the archive image on the screen." I put the archive image on the screen. The technician's fingers hesitated for only a moment before pressing the key, and the old monitor mounted above the customer service desk flickered through static, then settled into a faded photograph washed in storm gray colors. Rain blurred the edges. Floodwater reached the doors of a civilian apartment building. National Guard trucks stood half-submerged in muddy water. A young rescue team faced the camera, soaked to the bone. Near the center was a broad-shouldered soldier lifting a frightened little girl toward higher ground while another family climbed behind him. He was not smiling. He was not posing. In fact, he was almost turned away from the camera, focused entirely on the people behind him. Sarah Carter stopped breathing for a heartbeat. She knew that photograph. It had lived inside a storage box in her home for years because her late husband had refused to throw it away. "Freeze it," she said quietly. The technician enlarged the image. Grain broke apart across the screen, but one detail remained clear enough to survive time. The young soldier's face. Marcus Reed lowered his eyes before anyone could look at him. He recognized the photograph immediately, not because he remembered being photographed, but because he remembered the child in his arms screaming for her mother while floodwater pushed abandoned cars against apartment walls. He had forgotten the camera. He had never forgotten the fear. The station fell strangely still. Even the buses outside seemed farther away. Daniel Brooks looked from the screen to Marcus and back again. "That could still be coincidence," he said, though the confidence had drained from his voice. Sarah did not answer immediately. Instead, she reached into the inside pocket of her command jacket and removed her phone. She unlocked it, opened an old album she had not looked at in months, and held it beside the enlarged image. The same photograph appeared, only cleaner. Then she swiped once more. Another picture filled the screen. Her husband stood beside the same rescue truck after the flood, one arm around a younger Marcus Reed. Both covered in mud, both exhausted beyond words. Someone had written across the bottom years ago in black marker, "The calm one who never stayed for the ceremony." Sarah's thumb rested on the edge of the glass. "My husband showed me this picture after that rescue," she said. Her voice remained steady, but something beneath it had softened into memory. "He told me one man kept frightened families moving when panic would have killed them. He said that man never raised his voice. He never pushed anyone. He made fear smaller. No one moved. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with a sound that suddenly seemed enormous." Ethan slowly stepped out from behind Sarah. He looked from the photograph to Marcus, then to the Eagle keychain in his own hand. "Mom," he whispered. That's the man from Dad's story. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. The entire station seemed to stop breathing around them. Somewhere a coffee cup touched the floor with a soft ceramic click. A vending machine compressor switched on. Nobody spoke. Daniel's fingers loosened around Marcus's cracked veteran card, and it slipped against the edge of the field tablet with a dry plastic scrape. He looked at the photograph again, then at the archive recording log, then at the shuttle footage frozen on the nearby screen. Every piece pointed in the same direction. Not one of them proved Marcus was perfect. Together they proved something much more important. His behavior that morning was exactly the same behavior recorded years earlier when no cameras, no promotions, and no recognition had mattered. Sarah turned toward the technician. Play the recording again. Static filled the air. Wind. Then, a frightened child crying. Then the younger voice emerged from the noise. Eyes on my hand. One step. That's all. Sarah looked at Marcus. You said the same thing to Ethan today. Marcus nodded once. Because scared kids don't need different words. They need the same safe ones. Sarah swallowed carefully. My husband remembered that sentence for the rest of his life. Marcus looked down. He remembered the wrong person.
No, Sarah replied.
He remembered the right moment. Daniel opened his mouth, searching for another explanation, but none came. His eyes drifted toward the camera mounted above Bay 3. For the first time that morning, he seemed to realize every assumption he had. Made had been preserved beside every act of kindness Marcus had chosen. The guard holding the body cam lowered it slightly, almost out of respect rather than instruction. The navy blazer woman quietly slipped her phone into her purse. The college student deleted his recording without anyone asking him to. Lily reached for her father's hand. Marcus squeezed it gently without taking his eyes off Ethan. The little boy walked forward 2 careful steps, still holding the open water bottle. You said my mom would find me, he whispered. Marcus smiled, barely. She did. Ethan looked at the bottle, then held it out toward Marcus with both hands as if returning something precious. Marcus did not take it immediately. Keep it, he said. You still look thirsty. Ethan hugged the bottle back against his chest. Sarah watched the exchange with tears she refused to let fall in public. Not because she was ashamed of them, but because she understood command carried responsibilities even inside gratitude. She straightened her shoulders and turned toward everyone gathered at Bay 3. Let the record reflect the following, she said. The evidence confirms Mr. Marcus Reed acted to protect my son before anyone, including himself, knew who that child was. Camera footage confirms he encouraged visibility rather than concealment. Shuttle footage confirms he prevented injury through measured action rather than force. Archived service records and historical evidence confirm today's conduct is consistent with his documented character over many years. She paused, letting every word settle where the earlier suspicion had lived. This man was not cleared because I recognized him. Her eyes moved across the crowd until they stopped on Daniel. He was cleared because the evidence proved he deserved to be. Daniel lowered his head. Colonel? His voice cracked slightly before recovering. I initiated my response according to protocol. You did, Sarah answered. But you treated a conclusion as if it were evidence. Daniel's shoulders fell a fraction. Yes, ma'am. The difference matters. He nodded once, unable to argue. Sarah extended her hand toward the cracked veteran card still, resting on the tablet. Daniel placed it into her palm without a word. She stepped toward Marcus and offered it back to him with both hands instead of one. Marcus accepted it quietly, running his thumb over the crack in the plastic before sliding it back into his wallet. Thank you, Sarah said. Marcus shook his head. You don't owe me thanks. For saving Ethan today, I do. He looked at the little boy, then at Lily standing beside him. I didn't save him, Marcus replied softly. I just stayed with him until his mother got there. Silence returned, deeper than before. No applause came.
No cheers.
Only the quiet sound of Ethan's breathing finally slowing. Lily leaning a little closer against her father's arm, and the morning wind lifting the corner of the printed service file resting on the trash can. Sarah watched Marcus for another long moment before speaking again. "Mr. Reed," she said, "now that the truth has been established, there is one question left. What should justice look like after a morning like this?" For a few seconds after Sarah Carter asked what justice should look like, nobody at Bay 3 moved. The crowd did not break all at once. It thinned slowly, like people leaving a church after hearing a truth they could not gossip about. The college kid walked away with his phone in his pocket and his eyes on the floor. The woman in the navy blazer stood near the vending machine with one hand over her purse, staring at Marcus as if she wanted to say something but could not find words that would not make her smaller. Daniel Brooks remained where he was, cap under his arm, shoulders squared by training and lowered by shame. The cracked veteran card was back in Marcus's wallet. The open water bottle was still in Ethan's hands. The recording box sat quiet on the metal trash can beside the printed file, no longer just old static from a storm, but a voice returned to the present. Marcus looked at Sarah, then at Ethan, then at Lily, whose fingers were still tucked into the sleeve of his faded olive jacket. "Justice?" he repeated, not as if the word confused him, but as if it deserved to be handled carefully. "Yes," Sarah said. Her command voice had softened, but it had not weakened. "You were misidentified, publicly questioned, and nearly entered into a report as a threat. My son was frightened by the way the response unfolded. Your daughter was exposed to all of it. So I'm asking you directly." Daniel swallowed. A guard lowered his gaze. The shuttle driver leaned against his door, both hands clasped in front of him. Marcus could have asked for money. He could have asked for Daniel's career. He could have demanded that the crowd hear every detail of his service record and every wound he had never brought into a room for sympathy. Instead, he looked down at Lily. "You okay, baby?" Lily nodded, but her eyes were wet. "They know now," she whispered. Marcus brushed his thumb across the strap of her backpack, right where it had started to dig into her shoulder. "Knowing is the start," he said. Then he looked back at Sarah. "First, I want the report corrected before I leave this station. Not later. Not after someone forgets. I don't want my name sitting in a system beside a word that was never proven." Sarah nodded once. "Done." She turned to the nearest officer. "Draft a corrected incident summary now. Include camera references, shuttle footage, radio log, and command review. Remove unsupported threat language." "Yes, ma'am." "Second," Marcus continued, "children shouldn't hear themselves turned into cases before they're made safe. If a child is lost, somebody needs to get low, speak soft, keep them visible, and ask what they need before everybody starts proving who's in charge." Sarah's face changed at that, because she knew he was not asking for kindness as decoration. He was describing a procedure, something teachable, something accountable. "We will revise the lost child response protocol," she said. "Trauma-informed first contact, camera-preserved timeline, and no threat language over open audio until facts support it." Daniel's eyes closed for 1 second. "And third," Marcus said, his voice even lower, "the bus station is where this happened, not inside your gate. If you fix it only for the base, then the next kid outside the fence still gets handled like trouble before anybody sees fear." Sarah looked toward the civilian station sign, the wet pavement, the Route 18 marker, the bench where Ethan had first sat down. "Then we include the Civilian Transit Authority," she said. "Joint training, public-facing family assistance point. Bay 3 becomes the pilot location." The words did not sound like charity. They sounded like work. That was why Marcus accepted them. Daniel stepped forward then, not fast, not dramatic. His cap remained in his hands. "Mr. Reed," he said. His voice was dry at the edges. "I owe you an apology." Marcus did not help him by looking away. Daniel had to stand inside the moment he had made. "I used a conclusion before I had evidence," Daniel said. "I let procedure become a shield for my assumption. I frightened your daughter and I frightened Ethan."
I'm sorry.
Marcus held his gaze. "Apology accepted," he said. Then, after a pause, But training still needs to happen. Daniel nodded. Yes, sir. That small sir landed heavier than any public humiliation could have. Sarah made the order official before the air could soften too much. Daniel would remain on duty under review, complete 90 days of supervised response training, and participate in rebuilding the protocol he had mishandled. It was not revenge. It was responsibility with a paper trail. That mattered more. Inside the small station office, the corrected report printed page by page. The machine made a soft clicking sound, and no one spoke over it. Sarah signed first. Daniel signed second. The transit supervisor signed as witness. Marcus did not sign until he read every line, slowly, his finger moving under the words like a man who had learned the cost of trusting paper too quickly. When he finished, he folded his copy once and slid it into the same wallet that held the cracked veteran card. Lily watched him do it. Is it fixed? She asked. This part is, Marcus said. Some things take longer. Sarah heard that. She did not rush to fill it with promises. Instead, she knelt in front of Ethan, now just a mother again for one brief breath. You did nothing wrong, she told him. You got scared. You found a safe adult. You held on until I came. Ethan leaned into her. Can Mr. Marcus keep the bottle? Marcus shook his head gently. You held it when you needed it. That makes it yours. Ethan looked at the empty plastic, then twisted off the cap with both hands. He held the cap out to Marcus, then changed his mind and pressed it into his own pocket. I'll keep this part, he said. So I remember. Marcus smiled a little. That's fair. Sarah stood and faced Marcus with the kind of respect that did not need an audience. Mr. Reed, the family support office needs someone who understands crisis before paperwork. I can offer a paid civilian advisory role. Not as a favor, because today proved you know what some of us forgot. Marcus looked at Lily first. Not for permission exactly, but because every second chance in his life had to pass through the child who had walked through the hard years with him. Lily gave him a small nod. Can it be after my dentist? She asked. For the first time that morning, a quiet laugh moved through the station. Not mocking, not loud, just human. Marcus looked at Sarah. After her dentist, he said. And only if the work reaches outside the gate too. Agreed, Sarah said. The Route 18 bus finally pulled in late, brakes sighing beside the yellow line. No one rushed Marcus now. No one stared at his taped backpack like it explained his worth. The guards stepped aside. Daniel held the door open without making a show of it. Ethan stood beside Sarah, one hand in hers, the other tucked over the bottle cap in his pocket. Lily climbed the first bus step, then turned back to look at her father. Marcus followed, his old olive jacket brushing the rail, his cracked card in his wallet, his corrected report folded beside it, his dignity no longer needing anyone's permission to be seen. Outside the window, Sarah Carter and her son stood in the gray morning light as the bus pulled away from Bay 3. No one applauded. No one cheered. But every person left standing there understood something they had not understood when the day began. Sometimes a miracle is only a bottle of water, a safe place to sit, and a man quiet enough to let the truth arrive without shouting.